I am so happy to see all you wonderful people here. It's really a pleasure to be able to share stories when you have all these new friends in the audience. I moved to North Carolina 3 years ago, and you know when you move, the first thing you're trying to do is find out your new life and fill it all up. And what I learned about moving is the more we talk to each other, we learn our stories, our families, our similarities, and that's how we bond. And I've been very fortunate to bond with a whole bunch of awesome people in North Carolina. So here is my story. My father, when I was young, my father told me that he had a little black book. And he told me that the little black book was written just for me, his oldest child. And he said that that book had everything I needed to know to grow up to be a responsible adult. All the phrases, all the words, all the sayings, all the proverbs, everything was in that book. And whenever I did something that made my father proud, his eyes would twinkle, and he was a handsome man. His smile would come on his face. His index finger would rise up, and my father would say, "Wonderful job. It's in the book." I loved hearing my father's famous 4 words of praise. I loved watching that smile come up on his face, and I did everything I could to ensure that I saw it and heard those famous 4 words often. To me, those phrases in the book were like notes to beautiful songs, and I was determined to sing those songs for the rest of my life. Now, I didn't have to worry about what was in the book because he repeated those things over and over and over again. I'll tell you 3 of his favorites. Education is paramount to success. Another one. Go to church every Sunday, which is interesting because my father went to church 3 times a year, Christmas, Easter, and Mother's Day. But he wanted his children to have a good education for the church, and my mother believed in that too, so she happily took us. But it reminds me of something my father also used to say. You've heard this. Don't do as I do, do as I... I thought he coined it until I grew up. And then the one my father said all the time. Proper prior planning prevents poor performance. Have you heard that? I think it's a military thing. He said it so much that one day my mother whispered in my ear, "Pretentiously pompous planning ticks me off." And she didn't say ticks. It was all P words. Do you need a minute? I don't want to say it. But I adored my father, and I did everything I could to hear his famous 4 words of praise and to see that smile on his face. As far as I can remember, I brought home good grades. I went to church every Sunday. I even taught Sunday school. And I proper prior planned so my father rarely caught me doing anything wrong. And it was all good with that book and my father until the age 15 and a half, because that's when I fell in love. He was 15. His name was Romeo. Oh. My father's smile was gone. His index finger rose up, but then he pointed it directly at me, and he bellowed 5 words I had never heard before. It's not in the book. Dating at 15 is wrong, not part of my plan for you, not in the book. But I told my father that I had my own songs to my own book. The songs I heard on the radio, I told him I had to dance to the music, my own music. I told him when it came to his book, it's your thing, do what you want to do, do-do-do-do, got it? Do-do-do-do. I told him I was going to have to tell his book, na 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 na, na 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 na, hey, 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 goodbye. Yes, my father did not appreciate the great music of the late 60s. So I defied the book. Not all of it, just the boyfriend part. My father and I continued to have a wonderful relationship. We talked about everything except boys. My mother was a very good mother, and my mother, she would listen to any stories about boys that I was willing to share, and I was a good daughter, and I shared stories. I was with Romeo for 8.5 years, a long time. And there was nobody significant for a while as I went through high school and college and got my own apartment, and then I met John. After dating John for 5 weeks, I brought him home to meet my parents. My father thought he was nice. My mother got details. Sucky, sucky. John didn't meet them again for 3 more weeks. John invited my parents and, of course, me out to dinner. Somewhere in the middle of the entree, John turned to my father and said, "I would like permission to marry your daughter." My father's face dropped. He flashed his face over to look at me, and I was beaming. He flashed over to look at my mother, and she was beaming. And that's when he realized he was the only one who did not know that that question was coming. His index finger rose up, but he used it to wipe the tears in his eyes. It was the first time I saw my father, retired Major Henry William Bolden, Jr., cry. It wasn't the last time. He cried all through dessert. He did. And in between the tears came the questions. Do you love my daughter? How long have you known each other? Do you have a job? What's your name again? And John must have had all the right answers, because during coffee, that smile came back on my father's face, the twinkle came in his eyes, his index finger rose up, and he said, "It's in the book." I was so happy. But I had been away from the house for a while, and I hadn't heard my father mention the book. So a few weeks after that, I went to the family house, and in my house, it was the kitchen table where all the heavy discussions take place. I sat down with my father. "Daddy, tell me about the book." He leaned back in his chair. He puffed on his ever-present pipe. Prince Albert wafted in the air. I hated the smell of Prince Albert, but I loved my father. And he said, "The book. The book came from your grandfather, my father, your grandpop. Did you know your grandpa was born in 1898 in Guyton, Georgia?" And I knew that, and he went on to tell me other things that I knew, and I just, you know when you're a child and your parents tell you stories and you just listen and listen and hope that one day they tell you something new? It happened to you? And then he dropped it on me. "Did you know your grandpop's father was white?" Now I was really listening. "His father was the landowner. His mother was a 14-year-old African-American sharecropper. It was not a consensual relationship. His mother died in childbirth. The father never accepted or responded to his responsibility. Your grandfather was raised, as they say, by a village. He only went to work when there was nothing to be done in the fields, and he dropped out of school completely in 3rd grade. Did you know that your grandfather taught himself to read after becoming an adult?" This blew my mind. This was a lot of information. Landowner, sharecropper, 14 years old, not consensual, died in childbirth, schooling till 3rd grade, taught himself to read after becoming an adult? I remember the one year that my father was transferred to, or deployed to Vietnam. We lived with my grandparents. And I remember my grandfather was retired then, and after breakfast, he would go out to the door and he'd pick up the Jersey Journal and the New York Times, and he would take them into the dining room and he'd spread them out and he'd read them cover to cover. And more than once, my grandfather turned to me and he said, "Read the newspaper every morning. Education is paramount to success." And my father went on with his story. He said, "You know how your grandfather told you he left Guyton, Georgia at age 15 and walked all the way to New Jersey? It's not true. He took the train. And it's a good thing he took the train too," my father said, "because on the train he saw African-American men who looked like him in blue suits with brass buttons and shiny black shoes. They were Pullman porters. And he looked at them and said, 'That's what I want to be.' And he became a Pullman porter. And it was not an easy job. He had to carry luggage. He had to clean the train cars. He sometimes worked in the kitchen. And like all the others, he didn't get much respect. They would call him George instead of their first names, and they never bothered even regular travelers to find out their first names. And instead of putting a tip into their hand, they would throw the tip on the floor behind them to force the Pullman porter to bend down and pick it up. He said, your father, your grandfather, was able to provide a good middle-class life for us with that job. This was a lot coming into me, and I remember things that were coming back to me about what my grandfather had taught me. He said, when you make a bed, you make it nice and tight so you can bounce a quarter off it. He taught me how to cut a grapefruit into perfect wedges. And when he would sit on the front step of 75A Oak Street in Jersey City, New Jersey, a house he had purchased, anyone who walked past that house, my grandfather sitting on his rocking chair would tip his hat and say, "Hadu, hadu." And many times he said to me, you treat everyone with respect, not even, especially if they don't treat you the same way. You treat them with respect. Don't do as they do. And my father went on. He said, your grandfather had no one to teach him how to be a man, but he learned to be a man by watching the men on the train interact with their wives and their children. And he watched the men in his neighborhood and listened to their conversations about life and love and investments. And he wrote it all down in a little black book. My father said, your grandfather passed that book on to me, and I am passing it on to you, my number one daughter. I remember my grandfather. Whenever I did something that made him proud, it's going to sound strange to you, but a twinkle would come into his eye, a smile would come on his handsome face, and he would raise his finger up and say, you ain't so hot, monkey doodle. I loved hearing his famous 5 words of praise. Well, married to John for 38 years, it worked. And we have 2 wonderful sons. They're smart, they're creative, they're personable, they're warm, they're loving, and they look pretty good too. But we never quite lived usually where my father was as they were growing up, so I always called him and kept him abreast of what they were doing. And I know as the years went on, my father's finger got shaky from Parkinson's. But I know it rose up when he heard conversations about his grandsons, because he would always end by saying, of course my grandsons are doing well. It's in the book. Thank you. You all are awesome. All right, one more story. You haven't sang today, right? When a question comes from the stage, you're supposed to answer. You haven't sang yet today, right? You need to sing, right? All right. I grew up with Motown, my favorite genre, right? What if Little Red Riding Hood was called Little Red? What if instead of going to see her grandmother, she went to see her big mama? What if instead of her big mama living in a little cottage with a white picket fence, what if she lived in a brick house? And what if instead of walking through the woods, she took the Motown A train? You would have a new story. I call it Little Red takes the Motown A train to Big Mama's brick. You're coming in a little fast. Big Mama's brick house. Good. The story begins like this. Little Red got a phone call from her big mama who said, I just called to say I love you. Keep going. I just called to say how much I cared. Oh, Little Red loved her big mama. They had a wonderful conversation. And then Big Mama said, come see about me. Little Red said, yeah. Oh, I love it. The next line. Little Red said, of course, get ready, 'cause here I come. Get ready, 'cause here I come. Get ready, 'cause here I come. They had a wonderful conversation. And when it was over, Little Red hung up the phone and she got a basket. She put a little red napkin in the bottom of that basket and she put food in that basket she knew her big mama would like to eat. Fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, collard greens in a jar. Y'all remember that? Sweet potato pie, cornbread, and you know what? A little bottle of red wine, because Big Mama liked a sip or two in the evening, and Little Red knew that, right? She put a little red napkin on top of that basket. She put on her red jacket, the one with the red hood, and she started to take that A train to Big Mama's house. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Someone saw her leave. It was the wolf. And he was no ordinary wolf. He was the big, bad wolf. You know what? He wasn't always called the big, bad wolf, but he had issues. His issues were with his papa, because his papa was a rolling stone, Wherever he laid his hat was his home. And when all he left us was alone. I can't go that high, that's why I let the audience do it. That big bad wolf saw Little Red on her way to Big Mama's house. He knew where she was going. He got into his car, Cadillac. It's my story. Red, 20-inch rims, diamond in the back, sunroof top. As he drove off, he leaned into the center console, put one arm on that steering wheel. He did what we call digging the scene with a gangster lean. Ooh. It's a little obscure. Y'all may not know it. And he sped off to Big Mama's brick house. You learned well. Thank you. He tricked Big Mama into letting him in. And when he got inside, he grabbed Big Mama, tied her up, put some duct tape on her mouth, and put her in the closet. And then he put on Big Mama's clothes. Yes, he did. Big Mama's powder blue nightgown, Big Mama's silver blue wig, and Big Mama's powder blue matching do-rag, because you got to match at night. You know what I mean. And he jumped into Big Mama's bed, pulled those covers up to his neck. And when he heard a sound outside, he said, who's there? Little Red said, it's me, Big Mama. Me who? Little Red. If you don't know me by now, you will never, never, never know me. Ooh. That's one y'all know, huh? Wolf said, well, come on in. Little Red opened up that door. Now, her brick house, Big Mama's, was just one big open room with a bed in the middle. Little Red saw that big bad wolf in Big Mama's house, Big Mama's bed. She said, Big Mama, you don't look so good. That wolf said, I know I don't feel so good either. You know, even though it's sunny outside, day after day, I stay locked up in my room. I know to you, it might sound strange, but I wish it would rain. How I wish that it would rain, 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 rain. I wish it would rain too, Big Mama, if that make you look a little better. You know, Big Mama, I don't know, because I see your smiling face, but you know what they say about smiling faces? Smiling faces sometimes pretend to be your friend. Oh, Big Mama wants, so happy to see you. Come on over here, Little Red, and give me a kiss. I want some sugar. I don't think so, Big Mama, because I think I better go, because I can't get next to you, can't get next to you, dun, 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 dun. In the interlude, that's when she was backing up to the door, and you know when she got to the door was locked, because it's always locked in the stories. That big bad wolf jumped out of that bed. He started chasing Little Red round and round the room. Little Red said, you better think about what you're trying to do to me. Yeah, think. The wolf said, I can't help myself. I want you and nobody else. Dun, 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 dun. And the Little Red was running round and round. She was going in circles. And finally she said, rescue me. Someone heard her. It was Big Mama's next door neighbor, William Hunter. Everyone called him Bill. Bill came out of his house, ran over to Big Mama's house, broke down that door, saw that wolf chasing Little Red. He said, stop. in the name of love. Before you break my heart, think it over. That wolf did not stop. Well, I'm here to tell you, Bill Hunter caught that wolf. Yes, he did. Tied that wolf up, put duct tape on that wolf's mouth. Yes, he did. And then he stood over that wolf, one foot on that wolf's chest, and he said, don't mess with Bill. No, 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 no. Don't mess with Bill. Leave my Billy alone. Don't mess. I lost y'all. Find the guy of your own. Okay. Little Red was safe. Oh. First thing Little Red wanted to do was find Big Mama. Well, Bill Hunter helped her look around. They found Big Mama in the closet. They untied her, took the duct tape off. A little bit of her mustache came off with it. Big Mama was so happy to know that Little Red was safe, she gave Little Red a great big hug. And then she went over to Bill Hunter and gave him a great big hug. And then she gave him a kiss on the lips. She had wanted to do it for a long time, but the opportunity had not come up yet. And she said, Bill, I love you so, I always will. Oh, Bill Hunter got a shiver out of that one, I tell you. But Bill Hunter believed that all creatures deserve a second chance, those who go astray. He took that big bad wolf to group therapy lessons, yes he did. And in a couple of months, the wolf repented and said he would never again act on his little red temptation. And I'm here to tell you that a few months after that, that big bad wolf moved to Detroit, got together with a bunch of other repenting souls, and they formed a group called The Temptations. And if you don't believe me, I can't help myself, because this whole story was just my imagination once again, running away with me. It was just my imagination running away with me. Thank you.